All right, today we're getting into a story that's pretty wild. It starts with just one tiny, almost invisible crack in a piece of metal, and it ends in a massive, fiery catastrophe. This is the story of the Bijlmer disaster, a crash that didn't just bring down a jumbo jet, it also tore the lid off a whole world of secrets and questions that people are still asking about. You know, that's the call nobody ever wants to hear. A totally routine cargo flight, just minutes in the air, suddenly turns into this desperate fight for survival. But here's the thing, the crew had no idea what was actually happening. They thought they had a couple of engine problems. The reality? Oh, it was so much worse. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This is the unbelievable core fact of the disaster. Two massive engines, each weighing thousands of pounds, were literally ripped off the wing of a 747 while it was flying. The obvious question is, how on earth is that even possible? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. Okay, so let's go right into the cockpit. The flight has just taken off, everything's completely normal, and then a single violent bang changes absolutely everything. So imagine you're the pilot. Out of nowhere, there's this deafening bang, and your massive 747 gets thrown into this insane, uncontrolled roll. Captain Yitzhak Fuchs and his crew, they were immediately in the fight of their lives, but they were fighting an enemy they couldn't even see. So up in the cockpit, they're scrambling, thinking they're dealing with maybe an engine fire. A tough but manageable situation. But down on the ground, people saw the terrifying truth. A truth the crew would sadly never get to understand. You had people out on boats in a nearby lake who looked up and saw it all. First, the 747 obviously in big trouble, and then the unthinkable. Two huge objects just tumbling out of the sky and crashing into the water. It wasn't just an engine failure, you see. This was a catastrophic structural collapse. The plane was literally coming apart in midair. Now, two engines don't just decide to fall off a 747. It just doesn't happen. To figure this out, we've got to look at the history of this specific airplane. And let me tell you, it was filled with red flags. This plane was, frankly, a ticking time bomb. It was old, it was in pretty bad shape, and it had a laundry list of recent malfunctions. In fact, U.S. authorities had tried to stop it from taking off in the first place. But the real killer flaw was basically invisible.
A tiny crack caused by
hairline
metal
cracks
fatigue
in the special
makes
pins
one
that
pin
hold
snap.
the engines onto
All the
the
stress
wings.
instantly shifts
So
to
the
the other
entire
pins
fate
and they
of Flight
fail in a
1862
split second.
really came down to
And
this
boom,
one
engine
small
number 3
piece
is
of metal,
gone.
the fuse pin. And here's the irony. It's actually designed as a safety feature. It's supposed to snap off cleanly to save the wing from damage in an emergency. But on this flight, that very safety feature is what kicked off the whole disaster.
It was like a horrifying domino effect. A tiny crack caused by metal fatigue makes one pin snap. All the stress instantly shifts to the other pins and they fail in a split second. And boom, engine number 3 is gone. But it doesn't just fall straight down. No, it gets flung outwards, acting like a missile, and slams directly into engine number 4, ripping it clean off the wing too.
Okay, so now we know what really happened to the plane. But you have to remember, the crew didn't. They were flying a severely crippled jet, totally blind to the real damage, and they were about to enter a 7-minute struggle for survival. And look, if any flight crew could possibly handle an emergency, it was this one. We're talking decades of experience, tens of thousands of flight hours between them. These were seasoned pros. But all that experience couldn't prepare them for an emergency that was, quite literally, off the charts. Nobody had ever faced this before. This right here, this is the critical disconnect that really sealed their fate. The crew thought they were dealing with a double engine failure, a serious but manageable problem. The reality was an absolute nightmare. They weren't just losing engine power. A huge chunk of their wing was gone, taking crucial flight systems with it. They were losing control. 7 minutes. That is all the time they had. They declared a mayday, they somehow wrestled this crippled giant back under some semblance of control, and they set up for an emergency landing. But as they tried to slow the plane down by extending the flaps, they were about to uncover the final fatal consequence of their shredded wing. And this is just the cruelest twist of fate. The one action they had to take to land the plane, slowing down using the flaps, was the very thing that made the plane completely unflyable. See, the flaps on the healthy left wing deployed just fine, creating massive lift. But on the damaged right wing, the flaps were gone. No flaps, no lift. The result? A catastrophic imbalance that sent the plane into a deadly, uncontrollable roll. I mean, the crew of Flight 1862 were absolute heroes. They fought for every single second of control against impossible odds. But in the end, you just can't defy the laws of physics. The plane was going down. Going down, going down. Those were the last haunting words from the cockpit. A final, heartbreaking admission that the fight was over. The massive 747 rolled completely over on its back and plunged, almost vertically, into the heart of a residential neighborhood. 43 people lost their lives that day. The 3 crew members, 1 passenger who was hitching a ride, and 39 people on the ground. People who were just at home, in the wrong place at the absolute wrong time. It was a tragedy that would scar the city of Amsterdam for years. But you see, the crash itself was the end of one story, but it was really just the beginning of another. A new story filled with unanswered questions, missing evidence, and a deep legacy of doubt that, honestly, continues to this day. Yeah, this is where things get really murky. The official investigation happened, but it left so many holes. Why was the cockpit voice recorder, the black box, just never found? What was really in the cargo hold? And who were these mysterious figures in white suits that people swore they saw combing through the wreckage right after the crash? These are the questions that have fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Now, the official story is pretty straightforward. It was a tragic, but ultimately unavoidable accident. The Dutch Safety Board looked at all the evidence and said the damage to the wing was just too severe for any crew, no matter how skilled, to overcome. But for a lot of people, that simple explanation has never, ever been enough.
So what is the truth of the Bilmer disaster? Was it a clear-cut tragic case of metal fatigue, or was there something more going on? A story of secrets, maybe even cover-ups, and a tragedy that we may never get the full explanation for. And that's a question you'll have to decide for yourself.